I think you should run it. I'll be really quick. I think I was not rushing you off, but I think we have another great speaker coming up. So I put in the back some new printouts. I'm State Senator Jonathan Lindsey. Thank you. Walk into some rooms and assume I never should. People know him. It is on my jacket though. So I brought some new printouts that we actually sent them from the office in the mail, but a lot of Hillsdale I don't cover, so the mail doesn't even come here. And I just encourage you to pick them up. And the thing I want to highlight is that what I see happening in politics, Republicans in Lansing and other places, it's like they're always trying to find a way to compromise to be a little bit more liberal, and the other side's always pushing the envelope, right? And the result is you push that over time, and we just keep moving to the left. So one thing that I think is important is trying to push the envelope back the other way, put out some new ideas that push it further. And so I think that inside this you see a couple of examples of legislation that I put forward that, in the current environment, very tough row to hoe to get anything through. But it's important, I think, for people, especially from conservative districts, to be putting these ideas out there, getting them in the conversation, pushing my colleagues towards it. And so I'll give you three, or maybe four quick examples. Number one is you hear people talk about tax cuts a lot, but most times when Republicans put real legislation forward in Lansing on this, they'll try to do like a 30-year phase-in of 0.1% cut every year so we don't lose any revenue. My legislative proposal on this is an immediate elimination of the personal income tax, zero personal income tax. And I think it's immediately, and that's not even that fun, that's just taxes. The election stuff, I've been in front of this group before and talked about that we have a lawsuit that I went to a lot of my colleagues and really asked people to get on board. I have one other Senate colleague who joined, several people from the House, but not as much as I would have liked, and really didn't get support from inside the caucus. But what we've done is challenged both Proposal 2 of 2022 and Proposal 3 of 2018, and we're challenging them under the U.S. Constitution's Elections Clause, Article 1, Section 4, saying that if it's up to the state legislature to set the time, place, and manner of elections, then you can't have a citizen ballot initiative that completely cuts the legislature out of that process. So that's a fight that we're fighting in court right now. We've got another one. I heard some talk about the masking and stuff earlier. So this took a long time to actually work through because it's a very complicated thing, but I introduced a bill, you can look it up at Senate Bill 734, that does a pretty big rewrite of the health code in Michigan. And the point of it is to get rid of anything that even looks or smells like law enforcement capabilities being handed to the health department. Because the fact is right now the health department is given power under Michigan law to do some pretty insane things. When they make these orders, that's why when Governor Whitmer backed off from her own executive emergency order, she handed it over to the health department. And that's what everybody had to live under. Most of our restaurants or businesses at some point in time that were shut down were because of the health department, not because of the governor. So this is a rewrite of the health code to put them back in a place where, if they want to put out a public notice and we say, we think there's a pandemic and you guys should do X, Y, Z, fine, give us your opinion and then we'll decide what to do with it. But they should not be going into the courts and then having the sheriff come in and shut people's business down and drag them out. The last two really quick, I talked already in front of this group about the Defend the Guard Act. It's an attempt to take control back at the state level of our National Guard. The DoD at the federal level depends on state National Guards to conduct their forever wars. And if the states would reassert control and say, we are not going to allow you to use our military to go into the foreign wars unless you go through the appropriate federal Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, war declaration process, you cannot take our people and put them in a war zone overseas. And the last one, and I'd like you guys to Google this if you haven't already, but it also relates to the pandemic and some of the fallout from it. But go home and Google pandemic treaty and see what shows up, because this month right now, the World Health Organization is attempting to finalize an international treaty on pandemic control. And treaties are, if they're properly done, they are binding law on, equal in law to other federal statutes. But that requires them to go through, again, what is this bill number? So this is 527, maybe I said I'm wrong before, but in order to get a treaty properly put in place, this is under the Federal Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, I think, whatever. But it requires the advice and consent of the U.S. Senate. And so if you look back in time, if anybody's ever heard of like the, during the Obama years, I think it was one of the Paris Climate Accords.
Mm-hmm.
They claimed that it was part of a previous treaty that had been passed a long time ago, properly ratified, etc. I think they were wrong. But my point is, what we see right now is the potential for the Biden administration to unilaterally, in an executive role, sign on to an international treaty and try to act like it has binding law on the U.S. citizens without ever getting the proper advice and consent of the Senate. Because I don't think, for instance, a pandemic treaty by the WHO that usurps control, I don't think our current Senate, given that it takes a 2/3 majority to do it, would pass that. But Biden might try to pass it anyway. So anyway, I have a state level bill to try to intervene again to stop this sort of potential overreach if that were to happen. And what it does is prohibits at a state level any actions by any public employee to try to implement a provision of a treaty that was not properly ratified at the federal level, and that comes with penalties like $10,000 fines per occurrence. But those are just a few of them. Grab one of these if you haven't gotten one. They're sitting out back. And again, I just want to highlight those because I think that we as conservatives need to constantly be thinking about pushing the envelope in the other direction. The other side does it every day. They beat us into the ground saying, how far left can we go? And our side does it too little. I guess I'll take one question.
Jonathan, does to have a, it can't be unconstitutional, can it?
What?
Well, we have what do you call it, we just said it.
A treaty?
A treaty. If it's unconstitutional, it can't work. Am I right or wrong?
Well, I mean, the problem is, you go back to the Paris Climate Accord, this was a very live conversation, and I think the examples I found was that they actually were able to argue, and in a few cases, I think they even went into court and stuff, and you know, ultimately it's better to fight this fight and put the provisions there to really block it, because I think the cases I saw were in Pennsylvania, where local governments were using the Paris Climate Accords to force local municipal codes and rules about the Green New Deal on their city residents, right? And they were saying this is binding federal law, which, as I said earlier, if a treaty is properly adopted, it has the same status as law effectively. But no, I mean, look, it shouldn't be able to be done if it's unconstitutional, but that rarely stops Democrats. One more.
Our Constitution and Declaration is absolutely perfect outside the Bible if it's upheld and abided by. If not, that's what's going on.
Amen. I mean, I think it's a great document, the best that's ever been written. You know, I'll take slight issue with, as time has gone on, we've done some things to it that weren't great. But it's one of the reasons that I go back to that over and over again and say, if we would use these great tools that were given to us by our founders, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We've got some great things that if we would focus on using them. Thank you all for having me tonight. All right, we got literally